Not all men are born equal. Since the dawn of time the strong have prayed the weak to empower themselves, be it dinosaurs, animals, or people. But over time humans have found dozens of ways to make themselves strong, from martial arts, to weapons, to training their own bodies. But one day in Qingqing a newborn baby was born with the ability to emanate light. And thus started the age of quirks. All over the world people were gaining abilities that only seemed real in stories and fairy tales. There were struggles, but like always humans adapted to their new powers that were given and built their society around quirks. Heroes were born to protect the people from people who misuse their powers for villainy. Yet over time people have lost what made them human, and instead let a quirk define one's strength. However, some decide to go against the norm of society, to push themselves when not given power. So that leaves one question. What could one boy do when he wasn't born with power? Ah! A little green-haired boy yelled in pain as he was blasted back from a small explosion before hitting the ground hard. Deku. A dirty blonde kid the same age yelled with a feral look on his face. What have I told you about getting in my way? The boy shouted as the small group of kids behind him laughed at the green-hair boy. But Kachan, you shouldn't bully. The green-haired boy was cut off with another small explosion slammed into his chest, knocking the wind out of him. So a good-for-nothing like you can boss me around, huh? The blonde boy said as he kicked the fallen boy, making him grunt in pain. What's a quirkless kid like you going to do about it? The blonde boy asked with a sadistic grin on his face. This was Izuku Midoriya, 8 years old, and he was quirkless. At the ripe age of 4 Izuku was diagnosed quirkless by his doctor due to the extra joint in his pinky toe, practically shattering his dreams of becoming a hero. Yet despite his quirkless nature Izuku still wanted to be a hero, so the boy studied quirks and broke them down with near ease with the first glances. However, nobody believed a quirkless person like him could become a hero. Not his doctor, not his teacher, not his mom. Not even his former friend, Katsuki Bakugo, or Kachan as he called him. Ever since Bakugo discovered his quirk and learned Izuku was quirkless, Katsuki has been bullying him. Katsuki was the one who came up with the nickname Deku, which means, the one who can't do anything. That's how Izuku got into this situation. After going to the park after school Izuku saw his old friend Katsuki bullying another kid along with 2 others. Trying to stop the bullies Izuku stood up to them, and instantly got his butt kicked as the person he was defending ran away. Izuku pushed himself up and glared at Katsuki, before flinching away at the glare he got. It's not our right to bully someone just because. Izuku was again cut off when Katsuki punched him in the face. Let me tell you something, Deku. Katsuki said in a calm rage as he stared down at the beaten Deku. Heroes win, and villains lose. A hero's #1 job is winning and beating the villain, so a quirkless nobody like you can never win. That seemed to stir something in the young boy as he pushed himself up. You're wrong. Izuku said, making Katsuki freeze along with the kids behind him. Heroes are meant to protect people. Their job is to save people. To give them hope. Izuku said with a determined look on his eyes as he stood up. Katsuki was slowly shaking in rage as his hands sparked and his eyes turned white. The kids behind him slowly backed away, fear they might get caught in the crossfire. Deku. Katsuki said slowly before cocking his arm back with an almost crazed look in his eyes. Die. Izuku closed his eyes and waited for Katsuki to blast in again like he always does. So he waited until. Hey! Izuku's eyes snapped open and he was surprised at what he saw. An old man with long white hair and a full white beard held Katsuki's arm as he glared down at the boy. The old man was tall, wearing brown cargo, a black shirt, and a black leather jacket. In the old man's ears were a pair of hearing aids that looked a little advanced. "I think it's time you go home, boy," the old man said with a glare as Katsuki pulled his arm back. "Or should I call the police and tell them about a bunch of boys using their quirks to beat someone up? I'm sure your parent would love to hear about that," he said in a deep voice, making the small group of kids shake in fear while Katsuki just flinched, but looked more annoyed than anything. "Now get, you little shits." The small group of kids quickly ran away while Katsuki glared at the man before turning and walking away. The old man sighed before turning to Izuku, who flinched at the old man's gaze. "You all right, kid?" he asked in a much softer voice as he looked at Izuku's face. "That's a nasty shiner you got." The green hair boy seemed to relax a bit at the old man's gently tone, before giving a weak smile. I'm okay. I'm used to this," he said in a sad tone. That made a concerned look cross the old man's face as he knelt. "Are you seriously hurt?" he asked while looking Izuku over, not seeing any blood at least. Izuku forced a smile that almost seemed real. "And nothing too bad," he said just before wincing and grabbing his stomach. Seeing this, the old man quickly looked around before seeing an ice cream cart not far. "Wait here, kid," he said before getting up and walking away. A few minutes later, the old man came back with a bag of ice. "Here, put this over your eye," he said while holding out the bag. Izuku took the bag before placing it on his eye, shivering at the cold feeling. "Thank you," he said while looking down with a sad look on his face. The old man looked at the kid with some pity before he sighed. "Come on, let's sit down," the old man said while pointing to a park bench a few feet away. Once they sat, the old man looked down to the little kid. "So, mind telling me what that was all about?" Izuku looked down as he moved the ice bag over his bruise. He didn't want to get Kachan in trouble, but he didn't want to lie to the adult that helped him. They were bullying a kid. Picking on him. I tried to stop them. And they didn't like that. The old man nodded but still looked a little confused. "Okay, but why was that blonde kid being so mean to you just for stopping him?" Izuku hesitated. Every time he told someone he was quirkless, they looked at him like he was useless, a deku. I'm quirkless. So. Izuku's head whipped up and he stared at shock at the old man, who looked even more confused than before, then realization crossed his face. "So those kids were bullying you because you don't have a quirk?" he said in a neutral voice. Izuku looked down as he gave a small sigh. "It's not just that. I want to become a hero one day. Even though I don't have a quirk. They say it's pointless since I'm quirkless, a deku," he said before closing his eyes and waited for the backlash. "The reason they're bullying you is because you have a dream and they don't want you to realize it." The old man deadpanned before rubbing his face with a sigh. "What is it with this generation being so cruel? None of those little assholes will never get a good woman." Izuku blushed at the crud language before giving the old man a smile. He didn't say he believed him, but he didn't shoot down his dream earthier. "Thank you again, old man, for helping me," Izuku said as he started to get up from the bench. "It's about time I get home, Mom will be woah." Izuku cut himself off when he felt pain in his right leg, making him buckle. The old man acted fast and pulled the kid up to the bench. Looking at the leg, he saw a large bruise on the kid's foreleg. It doesn't look broken, but it defiantly is bruised," he said before giving a sigh. "Where are your parents, kid?" Izuku winced as he felt his leg throb before he looked at the old man with watery eyes. "I'll live around the corner, a block from here," Izuku said as he tried to fight the tears. Now the old man winced at the crying kid before he let out a sigh. Getting off the bench, Izuku was almost scared the old man was going to leave him, before the old man knelt in front of the boy, his back to him. "Hop on, kid," the old man said with a grunt. Izuku looked bewildered at the old man. But I'm heavy." "Trust me, kid," the old man cut him off with a smile. "I'm used to carrying stuff on my back." Hesitating for a second, Izuku slowly climbed up onto the old man's back as he lifted him up with ease. "So, where to, kid?" the old man asked as Izuku pointed the way. After about a few minutes of walking, the two found themselves at Izuku's home not far from the park they were at. Knocking on the door, it wasn't long before Izuku's mom, Inko, opened the door. "Hello, how can I, Izuku?" Inko yelled in shock as she saw her baby boy in the back of an old man. "What happened?" Inko Midoriya was a tall woman looking a little plump around the edges in her mid-20s. She had dark green hair that matched her son's, only straighter and in a bun. The old man gave a small smile. "So you're the kid's mom, huh? Can we come in?" he asked, and Inko quickly moved out of the way and the two entered. "And don't worry, your kid just has a few bruises." That alone almost made Inko faint. "How did this happen, Izuku?" she asked as the old man placed Izuku on a couch. The boy looked hesitant before he spoke. "Some kids were bullying someone, so I stepped in," he said in a quiet voice. "They beat me up. Then he saved me," Izuku said while giving the old man a big smile, making him blush a bit. "Anytime, kid," the old man said with a laugh before he looked at the time. "Well, I better get moving, the sandwich place I go for dinner is about to close and I don't want to miss it," he said as he turned around. "Wait," Inko said quickly, stopping the man. "Would you like to stay for dinner? It's the least I can do for you helping my son, Mr." Inko trailed off as she didn't know the man's name. The old man seemed hesitant before nodding with a smile. Clint Barton. "And that would be great, thank you," he said, getting a smile out of the woman. "I'm Inko Midoriya, and there's no need for thanks. You helped my son, I'm more than happy to help you," she said before moving to the kitchen. It wasn't long before a full-course meal was on the diner table and the three started to eat. Clint glanced at the little green boy as he ate quietly. "So, how's your eye, kid?" Clint asked, making Izuku jump a bit. The green-haired boy gave the man a smile. "It doesn't hurt anymore," he said with a smile that was real. "That's good," Clint said with a smile. "You were pretty brave stepping up to those kids, even though you don't have a quirk." Izuku smiled at that while Inko looked a lot more hesitant. "I just thought, what would All Might do?" Izuku said with stars in his eyes. Clint laughed as he saw the kid become a full fanboy. "Yeah, All Might is pretty awesome. Not many people can do what he can do," he said before remembering what the kid said at the park. "So you want to be a hero to one day?" Inko flinched again at that while Izuku nodded with a determined look in his eyes. "Yes, I want to be a hero one day just like All Might." "Well, it's not going to be easy, kid," Clint said in a serious voice, making Izuku shrink a bit. "Even people with quirks have a tough time becoming heroes, so not having one is going to put you at a big disadvantage." he said, making Izuku look down. But hey, if you show that kind of bravery and guts when you're training to become a hero, I'm sure you can become a hero. Both Izuku and Inko froze at the words and gaped at the old man, something he quickly saw. Do you really think I can become a hero? Izuku asked in a shaky voice, his eyes filled with hope. Clint was slightly caught off guard by the look in Izuku's eyes before remembering this boy's state. Honestly, Izuku held his breath along with Inko, waiting for the man's answer. That's all up to you, he said, getting a confused look from the two. What do you mean? Izuku asked in a confused and innocent voice. Clint pointed to himself with a grin. Personally, I think people have no right to decide someone's dream. If you want something bad enough, then do everything you can in order to get it, he said before a thoughtful look crossed his face. Are you preparing to become a hero? That question seemed to snap Izuku out of his shock and he quickly nodded. Why yes, I take notes, he said as he got up from his seat and quickly ran up the stairs despite the pain in his leg. It took a full minute before he found what he was looking for and ran back to the table with a notebook in hand. Here. Clint raised an eyebrow at the notebook before taking it. His eyebrows raised even farther when he read the title. Quirk Analysis Volume 6. Opening the book, Clint's jaw dropped when he opened the book and started to read. It was filled to the brim with detailed analysis on quirks, what they are, how they work, what they can be used for to gain an advantage, and the best way to counter the quirk. Hell, the book told how to counter most quirk without the need of one. Damn kid, this is scary good, Clint said in shock, and that seemed to make Izuku beam with pride. With a mind like that you can become a scary tactician. Tactician? Inko asked in a confused voice. It's basically someone who comes up with a plan, Clint said as he turned a page in the book. Most heroes are trained in tactician, but some heroes specialize in it. Not a lot, mind you, since most heroes love being super flashy instead of actually doing their job officially, Clint said with an annoyed look on his face, surprising the mother and son a bit. So what about fighting styles? He asked, catching Izuku off guard. Fighting styles, he said with some hesitation. Clint saw this and folded his arms. Yes, fighting styles, everyone needs to know some way to fight. Even with your head you'll need some way to fight if you want to be a hero. You could be a martial artist, using techniques in your fists to fight others, or you can use weapons such as swords or guns in order to fight. Guns. Inko muttered in a scared voice, looking a little faint. Clint didn't hear this and continued. Personally, I think both would help you get farther. Weapons can give a person an advantage like a quirk, but if you lose your weapon then you got to learn how to fight with your hands. Izuku put a hand on his chin and started to think rapidly. He's right, all the great heroes use weapons and martial arts to fight, not just quirks. Eraserhead uses scarves and sneak attacks as his main combat attacks, Midnight uses a whip, the Wild Pussycats use a cat-like martial art to be both flexible and agile. What martial art and weapon would be good for me? Boxing is too straightforward and is only good for one-on-one opponents, yet it's easy to learn, plus the training would help me build up stamina. Judo would be great against larger opponents who have resistant durability, and putting them in a hold would allow me to capture them. But what weapon would go good? Swords would be good against some with high durability, a staff could provide mid-range attacks. A bow and arrow would be perfect for long-range attacks. Mumble. Clint's eyes nearly popped out of his head as he saw the green-haired kid mumbling at such a fast pace it almost looked like he was doing all in one breath. Kid! Clint shouted, making Izuku jump in shock. Jesus, it looked like you were having a seizure. Clint said with a sigh before turning to Inko. Does this happen often? Inko sighed but smiled at Izuku, who blushed in embarrassment. It's a habit he's had since he was little, it happens every time he focuses on something. She said, making Clint laugh softly. Well, some kids have been known to be quirky. Clint said with a heart-filled laugh. Do you have children, Mr. Barton? Inko couldn't help but ask, seeing how he seemed to have experience. A smile grew on Clint's face. I have a daughter, her name's Lila. She's about 21 right now. Izuku's face scrunched up as he heard the name Lila. Since her dad's last name is Barton, that would mean her name is Lila Barton. Wait. Izuku suddenly shouted in shock, making the two adults jump. Is your daughter Lila Barton, otherwise known as the master marksman Hawkeye with the quirk, Plastique, which allows her to turn anything plastic into an explosive, the 20th most popular pro-hero in America and is climbing the ranks super fast? Clint looked surprised before he chuckled. I'm surprised you know about her, she is an American hero after all. However, Izuku wasn't done talking. But if she's your daughter, who said in an interview that she took up the mantle of Hawkeye for her father, that would make you the original Hawkeye. Izuku shouted in an excited voice. Now Clint looked really surprised, along with Inko. Damn kid, you really are a hero fan. That interview was a few years ago. Izuku started jumping in his seat as he stared at Clint with stars in his eyes. You were the 5th most popular hero in America for years before you retired. Your main weapon was a bow and trick arrows you used to catch and take down tones of villains. Your quirk is sonar, which gives you bat-like hearing. No villain could ever sneak up on you. Now Clint was blushing a bit as Izuku went on about his glory days. Damn, you actually making me blush, kid. Clint said as he gave the kid a smile. With all this knowledge stuck in your head, I'm sure you'll be a hero. Now that made Izuku put on a sad smile while Inko looked down with a sad look. Thank you, Mr. Barton, but it won't be that easy. Not a lot of people want to put any effort into helping someone who's quirkless. I'm going to have to teach myself. Clint's face frowned at that. Quirkless people were seen as less than human, just because they couldn't fly or fart rainbows. Hell, even if a quirkless person did something really good, 9 times out of 10 everyone will choose the person with a quirk instead of someone quirkless, like it was principle. Izuku was having similar thoughts. Every time he asked someone how he could be a hero, as soon as he said he was quirkless they told him to give up, that it was pointless. He asked teachers, adults, other heroes, his friend, even his own mom. They all said there was no hope for him to become a hero, no one wanted to help him, or believe in him. But Clint Barton believed in him. Giving the retired hero a hesitant look, despite only knowing him for a few hours, the old man gave Izuku more support than anyone else. So Izuku had nothing to lose with his question. Could Izuku said, grabbing the two adults' attention. Could you train me, Mr. Barton? He asked in a small voice. The old archer was defiantly caught off guard by the question before a serious look crossed his face. Kid, are you sure you know what you're asking? Clint asked, making Izuku shrink a bit. I have learned a lot skills over the years, but archery is my bread and butter. And if I was going to teach anyone, I make damn sure they learn everything I can teach them, even if I have to drag them kicking and screaming. Izuku shook at the words as he stared at the old man, who looked a lot bigger all of a sudden. Inko looked at her son in worry and thought he was going to cry, but before Inko could step in, Izuku Please train me to be a hero." Izuku shouted at the top of his lungs, shocking Inko as she saw the determined look on his eyes. Clint looked into the kid's eyes and saw he didn't flinch, making the old archer grin. "Well, I can't train you to be a hero," he said, getting a shattered look from Izuku. "That's something you're going to have to do on your own. What I can teach you is how to fight, what you do with it is something on your own," the old archer said in a cheeky voice. Izuku pouted at the old man with red cheeks as Inko laughed behind her hand. "Couldn't you just say you'll train me?" Izuku said, looking peeved but also unbelievably happy. "Where's the fun in that, kid?" Clint said as he took out a pen and paper from his jacket. "Here's my address, come by tomorrow around 4 Izuku." As Izuku grabbed Clint suddenly grabbed his hand, stopping the boy. "This is your last chance to back out, just because you're a kid doesn't mean I won't hold back," he said in a serious voice. Izuku looked Clint in the eyes and smiled with a determined look on his face, surprising Clint a bit. "I won't give up being a hero, so I won't give up on this," Izuku said as he took the paper. Inko quickly brought into a hug as tears were in her eyes. "Izuku, I'm so proud of you," she said in a tearful voice. Clint smiled at the mother and child before looking at the time. "Well, it's about time I go," Clint said as he got up from his chair. "I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku." Izuku saluted with stars in his eyes. "Yes, sensei." Clint shook his head as he started to walk out with Inko. "Let's hope that kid keeps his enthusiasm turning training." "He will," Inko said with a small smile. "Izuku has always been optimistic with things," she said as they reached the door. "I need to thank you," Inko said in a soft voice. Clint waved her off. "Don't worry about it, retired heroes have a lot of free time on their hand. Please," Inko cut off while looking in the old man's eyes. "Let me speak." Clint was silent before he nodded. "For as long as I can remember, Izuku has always wanted to be a hero, just like All Might," Inko said with a smile as she remembered seeing her little boy run around in a All Might onesie. But ever since he was diagnosed quirkless, that seemed an impossible. No one wanted to help a quirkless boy achieve his dream of being a hero, no one supported him. "Not even me," she said in shame. Clint gave the mother a sad look as she placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your mother worried about your child's safety and future. Trust me, I know. My wife was worried sick when Lila decided to become a hero herself," Clint said with a smile as he remembered his wife. "Still, I never did anything," Inko said, looking ashamed. "I never supported him, persuade him to change careers, nothing. All I ever done was just say I was sorry I could never give him a quirk." She then gave Clint a teary smile. "But you gave my boy something I could never give him, hope he could be a hero despite everyone saying otherwise." The mother then bowed to the retired hero, surprising him a bit. "Thank you." Clint gave a small smile to the woman. The kid had a lot of talent with his head from the notes he read, and the kid's brave to stand up to others despite not having a quirk. Izuku just needed some guidance in the end, being a great hero was all him. "I'll take care of him, Ms. Midoriya," Clint said with a smile. Inko rose up and gave the old man a smile. "Thank you, and please, call me Inko," she said before the old archer walked out. Clint Barton walked into his home about a half an hour since leaving the Midoriya residence. The house was somewhat big with an American style to it with a large backyard, perfect for training. As Clint walked in he saw pictures on the wall showing images of his life. His wedding with his wife, his daughter as a baby, himself along with old friends in their hero costumes, and even a picture of his daughter taking the mantle of Hawkeye. As the old archer walked into his house, he saw his phone hand some messages on it, meaning they could only be from his daughter. Picking up the phone, the retired hero quickly called up his daughter. "Hello. Hey sweetie, it's your old man," Clint said with a smile as he held the phone to his ear. "Oh hey Dad, I was calling to check in, see how you were adjusting to your new home." "It's okay," Clint said with a shrug, even though no one could see him. "The heroes here are a little too flashy for my taste, but they get the job done at least." "Tell me about it, I've seen a few heroes there look like they came straight out of a Power Ranger movie," she said, getting a laugh out of her father. "So what's with you, you seem chipper." Clint thought about the boy he had been roped into teaching with a small smile. "I met this kid at the park today, about 8 I think." The boy was standing up to 3 kids while protecting some other kid. "Got his ass kicked pretty easily." "I'm going to assume there's more to this other than you sounding like you got your jollies from seeing kids beat each other up." Lila deadpanned on the phone. Clint laughed as his daughter's sarcasm, knowing she got it from him. "Yes, I stepped in and talked to the boy, turns out the kid is quirkless." "A quirkless kid stepping up to bullies using their quirks. That is ballsy for a kid his age." "I know," Clint said with a snort. "So I take the kid home and his mom invited me to diner. And after some talking the kid recognized me after I dropped your name." "Wow, I knew you were popular over here and I'm slowly rising up, but I didn't think someone in Japan would recognize our names." "Yeah, well this kid is a big fanboy when it comes to heroes. In fact he said he wanted to become a hero himself on day." "Seriously, wow," Lila said in a surprised tone. "I mean I have seen people with almost useless quirks become heroes, so I guess a quirkless person becoming one isn't too far off." Clint gave a small laugh. "Trust me when I say this kid has some talent. He showed me this notebook he had on quirks, and let me tell you it was scary. Like scary good, or scary obsessive. A little of both honestly, but mostly scary good. It went into detail on how a quirk works to how it can have an advantage to how to counter it," he said with a small laugh as he remembered the boy being embarrassed for it. "Dad, I feel like you're going somewhere with this kid and him wanting to be a hero. He asked me to train him." "I thought you said you liked this kid, why do you want to torture him?" Clint snorted at that. Yup, she was his daughter all right. "He asked me, and I said yes." "You should have seen the look in this kid's eyes when I asked him if he wanted to become a hero, pure determination. Reminded me a lot of your mom, that's how she always got her way," he said, getting a laugh out of Lila. "So you decided to torture. Teach. Dad, I love you and all, but your teaching is torture. Trust me, I remember. Love you too. But Dad, are you serious about taking this kid in and teaching him?" Clint's face turned serious. "I am serious, because if I don't step up and help him, no one will." "It's that bad, huh? That bad," he said with a sigh. "You know how people get with quirks, how they want them to be big and flashy to make them a better hero. Having a useless quirk is hard enough, but some people still become heroes. Yet a quirkless person has never tried to become a hero because the world says it's impossible," he said as he remembered people with very passive or useless quirks struggle to become heroes. "You're really going for it, one last student for your old ass." Clint gave a low laugh as he sat in his couch. "One last student, and let me tell you, he feels like he'll go the distance. Well, call me if you ever need any help." I would like to meet my new, little brother." Clint laughed at his daughter's words. "Trust me when I say I am too old to have more kids," Clint said as they continued to talk for about an hour before they said goodbye and went to bed. Izuku shuffled nervously as he stood in front of the address he was given. School was normal as any other day. Katsuki even left Izuku alone and mostly brooded the whole day about what happened yesterday. Taking a deep breath, Izuku pressed the doorbell to the house. A moment later, Clint opened the door and smiled at Izuku. "Right on time," he said as he stepped to the side. "Come on in." Izuku stepped in the house and noticed it had an American style to it. As he looked around, the quirkless boy's eyes landed on the picture with a younger Hawkeye. "Is that you with the other members of the Defenders, one of the most popular hero groups in the world?" Izuku asked in an excited voice. "There's Luke Cage, Daredevil, Iron Fist, Valkyrie, and Hellcat." Clint chopped the top of Izuku's head, stopping the rant. "Hey kid, remember I agreed to teach you how to fight, not talk about my past." Izuku rubbed the top of his head with an embarrassed look on his face. "Sorry sensei." Clint quickly waved his hand. "It's fine, and maybe if we finish training I can tell you some old stories," he said, seeing the stars in Izuku's eyes again. "Now come on, we have a lot of training to do." The archer master and student quickly found themselves in the back of the house in an open backyard with a tall brown fence all around. There were several training items all over the green grass, such as practice dummies, punching bags, targets, a wooden dummy, and some monkey bars. Izuku left his book bag in the living room to not let it get in the way of his training. "Common," Clint said as he led Izuku to the back of yard to where a bucket was full of water. "Sit." Both Clint and Izuku sat across from each other with the bucket between them. "Which hand is your dominant hand?" Izuku raised his right hand. "Alright, now I want you to smack your palm into the water until it's empty." Izuku looked confused, but in the end he did so. The 8-year-old boy slapped his palm into the bucket and water spilled out until most of the water was gone. As soon as the bucket was empty, Clint got another pail from nearby and filled Izuku's bucket full. Again. And that was Izuku's first day of training. Splashing water out of a bucket with his right hand until the sun had set. "Alright, that's enough for today," Clint said while giving Izuku a grin. "So, what do you think of the train?" Izuku furrowed his brows as a thoughtful look crossed his face. "I know you're taking me seriously and I know you're a professional, so this exercise isn't useless," Izuku said while rotating his arm. "My arm is sore, but feels a little stronger. I've read that an average bow has a pull weight of about 80 pounds on average, yours was rumored to be about 250. So I guess the water smacking was to help me build my arm strength," Izuku finished in one breath. "Are you sure you need my help, kid?" Clint couldn't help but ask. A little freaked out, Izuku figured out the purpose behind the basic training. Then a wicked grin crossed the man's face that scared Izuku a bit. "But don't worry, this is just the first week or two, after that we go on to the hard stuff." With that, Izuku's training started. For the next 10 months Izuku did what he could only describe as hellish training under Clint's teaching. At first things were simple. Izuku did some runs, a few weight lifting, and mostly splashed some water. That was the first 2 weeks. After Izuku started to build some muscle, the harder training came in. Clint gave Izuku one of his old practice bows and a quiver of arrows. It took Izuku a few days before he was able to hit the center of the target. It wasn't just bow training, Clint also taught Izuku how to fight with knives and swords, though they were sure to use practice ones. The old archer even started to teach Izuku different martial arts he knew would be useful, such as Judo, Krav Maga, Kali, Hapkido, Muay Thai, and Taekwondo. After about 10 months of hard training, Clint came to Izuku with an offer. A camping trip. Izuku asked as he put down his sandwich. The two were at Clint's house and taking a break after some target practice with a bow Clint gave Izuku. Clint nodded to his student with a grin on his face. "Yeah, I found this place we can go to train for a few weeks during your break. The change of scenery will push you better than a comfy backyard," he said as Izuku bit into his sandwich. "Also, my daughter is coming to visit." That made Izuku choke on his sandwich with a shocked expression on his face. Pounding on his chest, Izuku coughed and gave Clint a shocked look. "Your daughter, the number 20 pro hero Hawkeye, is coming here." Despite all the training and confidence boost Izuku had, he was still a fanboy to all heroes. Clint gave a light laugh as he waved Izuku down. "She likes to be called Lila when off the clock. She wants to come and make sure I didn't screw up on your training, kid." "What, but you're a great teacher," Izuku quickly protested. Sure, the training was hard, but the green-haired boy could see and feel the progress he was making. Clint smirked and waved Izuku off. "I'm old, kid, and my last student is making sure I didn't fuck up with you," he said with a snort. "So I need you free for your break so the three of us can train. I have nothing planned, and I'm sure my mom will allow me to go," Izuku said with a confident look. Izuku's words were true. When he told his mom about the training camp, she was hesitant at first before she remembered her son's progress. Ever since Izuku started training, he's been happier, smiling more often, and coming home with less bruises. At least from school. So after helping him pack his bag, Izuku went on his training trip with Clint into the forest with the current Hawkeye Lila Barton. The young woman was tall with long black hair, light skin, and a pair of purple sunglasses that matched her father's when he was a hero. As soon as Izuku met the young woman, he couldn't help but go all fanboy, much to the Bartons' amusement. In the forest, the two Bartons trained the young hero in training to the best of their abilities, though it was mostly bow and technique training. They also trained in stealth and surprise attacks, though Izuku was never able to catch either of them off guard. They refused to give Izuku any muscle training for a very important reason. As much as it would be funny to see your short self with the body of All Might, it's best if we hold off on muscle and strength training until you're at least 13. Lila advised. You're still developing, growing, and strength training now will only hurt your body and maybe your future, she said, getting a nod from Izuku. The two became close over the training camp, almost like brother and sister. In fact, by the end of the training camp, Lila demanded Izuku call her big sis from now on, and the boy quickly agreed. I always wanted a little brother or sister, but since my old man never had any other kids, that was never going to happen, Lila said while throwing her dad a playful smirk. Clint just snorted as he folded his arms. The reason I never had more kids was because I was afraid they would be like you. My poor soul can only take so much, he said, getting a playful punch for his daughter. This went on for years, and over time Izuku was slowly getting stronger and stronger. His marksmanship with a bow practically reached their level, if just a little under their skills. Izuku also showed great skills with a sword, able to hold his own with Clint for long periods of time. Stealth became like a second nature to Izuku. The green boy was able to hide his presence like a ninja and even caught Clint off guard a few times. The old archer also taught Izuku parkour and acrobatics for mobility and dodging purposes. Clint was also right when assuming Izuku would be a great tactician. The boy was able to come up with game-winning plans against nearly any quirk in just a few seconds, scaring the two Bartons a bit. Not only that, but Izuku became close to the two Bartons, seeing them as family. This went both ways, as Clint saw Izuku as a grandson while Lila saw Izuku as a little brother. Though not everything was sunshine and rainbows with the training. There was one event that struck Izuku to his core. The death of Clint Barton. 5 years later. A 13-year-old Izuku stood in front of a grave with Lila Barton next to her, both with sad looks in their eyes as they read the tombstone. Clinton Francis Barton. A father. A teacher. A hero. A few months ago Clint was diagnosed with terminal cancer, giving him only a few months to live. Despite the advanced medical science in this day and age, not even the doctors could cure Clint's cancer. Both Izuku and Lila were devastated when they heard the news, and Lila quickly took time off from her hero duty to be with her father and Izuku. Yet despite the grim news, Clint never stopped training Izuku. In fact, he seemed more determined to complete his promise of teaching Izuku all he knew about fighting. So Clint, with the help of Lila, pushed the hero in training to the near breaking point that it was almost dangerous, yet Izuku never complained. In fact, he pushed himself just as much, if not more. When Clint's time finally came, his body was moved to America where he could be buried with his wife. A funeral was held and a lot of Clint's old friends came, most of them being retired heroes or close friends. Izuku would have went full fanboy if not for the fact his teacher and close friend had passed away. The green-haired boy wasn't ashamed to admit he cried when he found out Clint was dying. The man had showed more support and belief than most of the people in his life. Clint helped Izuku gain confidence in himself, helped him become stronger. Clint Barton gave Izuku hope when no one else did. "What are you going to do now?" Lila asked as she didn't take her eyes off the tombstone. "You practically learned everything my dad taught you, and I don't know if there's anything I can teach you." Lila said. It was true, the only thing Izuku lacked was experience and could improve on a few of his skills, but there was nothing significant the young woman could teach the boy. "Train," Izuku said, trying to keep his voice even as he stared at the tombstone. "I'm 13 now, so I can start working on muscle and strength training. I got about 1 year before I can take the UA entrance exam," he said, making Lila nod silently. "Here, take this," Lila said while handing Izuku a long wooden box, surprising the green-hair boy a bit. "Dad told me you've been getting good with swords and knives lately, not just a bow and arrow." Izuku opened the long box and his eyebrows shot up in surprise. Inside was a somewhat large Bowie knife and a somewhat short katana. The knife was a little smaller than half the katana, but just as wide. The handle was a smooth dark wood that looked like art. The katana was about 40 centimeters long with a black and golden handle. "I went to David Shield himself and had them made. They're not high-tech like most of the stuff he makes, but they're sharp as hell and will stay like that for a while," Lila said before giving Izuku a serious look. "But remember to take care of it, it's still a blade and can wear down." Izuku looked at the blade and gave his sister a smile. "Thanks, I'll treasure them," he said as he closed the box. Lila nodded with her own smile. "I didn't have enough time to ask Shield to build you a bow since he's so backed up, but give it a few months and I'm sure he'll come up with." "Actually," Izuku cut his big sister off, a determined crossed his face. I was thinking about trying to make my bow myself, or maybe find someone to help me make it. Lila grinned at her little brother. Got a few ideas in that head of yours. A few. He said with a small laugh before he turned to the grave, a sad look crossing his face. I miss him. He said, making Lila give a sad smile. Trust me, I miss him too. The hero said while sighing. But he's with my mom now, so he's not alone. Izuku stared at the grave for a long moment before he knelt down with a solemn look in his eyes. I honestly don't know how I could ever repay you. Izuku said as his hair shaded his eyes. You were the first person ever to believe in me, who thought I could be a hero despite me being quirkless. Izuku felt his eyes water as he tried not to cry. I'll become a hero, I'll become one of the best heroes ever, and give people hope like you gave me. Izuku nearly shouted as Lila brought her little brother into a hug. And that's how Izuku Midoriya went of his path to become a hero despite the world saying he couldn't. Deep in an abandoned warehouse, a lone figure stood with several targets around him, 10 to be exact. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, the figure just stood in place with his hand on an old worn-out bow and a quiver on his back, a hard look in his eye. Suddenly a beep was heard, making the figure move into action. Pulling an arrow out of the quiver on his back and aimed at one of the closet targets. Twang! In less than 10 seconds all the targets had one arrow in the center of each of them. The figure gave an annoyed sigh as he pulled on the bow's string. I'm really going to need a new bow. The figure said as he walked into the light. Maybe I should have taken Lila's help with getting me a bow. This was Izuku Midoriya, 14 years old. The young teen was currently shirtless with only a pair of loose cargo pants on, showing the progress of the intense training he's went through over the years. The young teen was about 5 feet and 3 inches tall, had a solid six-pack, and his muscles were much more defined than most young teens his age. It's been about a few months since Clint's death and Izuku has been training ever since he came back from America. Trying to keep his skills sharp and get stronger. The young teen sighed as he stretched his body, looking at the time he saw it was barely past 2. Well, at least it's a weekend. After wiping himself down and putting on some clean cloths, Izuku made his way out of the warehouse and started to make his way home, putting his bow and arrows in his bag. As Izuku walked down the road he thought about the old and worn-down bow in his bag. I really hope someone answers my ad soon, or I'm going to have to buy a regular bow. Izuku knew he was smart, but his mind was built more for tactician and detective work. Advanced science and mechanics were a little beyond him at the moment, so he'd put out an ad online asking for anyone willing to help him build some inventions to help him get into UA. The requirements were simple, the person just had to have an open schedule and have some knowledge on science and building. He would pay the person and provide the necessary equipment. Unfortunately no one had answered his ad in nearly a 2-month. It's fine, Izuku said as he rubbed his face. It's just been 2 months, I still have more than 10 months until the UA exam. And even if no one answers my ad I still have more than enough skill to pass the exam. I said stop. Izuku suddenly froze in place as he heard the cry. From what he heard it was female and not far from where he was. The green-haired teen started running down the street in a blur as he kept his ears sharp. As Izuku passed an ally he stopped dead in his tracks at what he saw. At the very end of the dead-end alley were about 6 people. 3 looked like young thugs with gangster-like cloths and a bad look in their eye. One thug had large hands and nails with wild black hair. Another was large with big muscles and was pretty tall, almost looking like a brick wall. And the last one was bald with a pair of goggles on his head. The other three were much different. Two were young, a 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, both looking extremely scared. The other one was an older girl, about the same age as him. She had large eyes, a somewhat large mouth with her tongue sticking out the side, long green hair that reached down to her lower back, and large hands and feet. From the way she was standing in front of the two kids, who looked a lot like her, she was protecting her siblings as she glared at the teen thugs. Her body was tense but also loose, ready for one of the thugs to make the first move. "Common, we just want some cash," one thug with the large hands said with a flirty grin. "Maybe you can ditch the kids and come hang out with the cool guys," he said, trying to sound flirty but ended sounding creepy. The girl with big eyes kept a calm look on her face as she glared at the older teens. "And I'll say again, no. I just want to go home with my siblings." Goggles seemed to snort as he took a step closer, making the older sister tense. "What, looking after your siblings is more fun than hanging out with us?" he said as he glanced at the older sister's chest and a perverted look crossed his face. "You have a really nice bod of someone with a weird FA. Wow, what has the world come to?" Everyone turned to the open end of the alley to see Izuku there, a grin on his face. Thugs now have to get their money in jollies from sticking up high schoolers and little siblings. Whatever happened to the cool, smart villains, the one that came up with brilliant plans to rob a bank or take down heroes? Instead we got you clowns. The three siblings looked at the green hair boy with a surprised looks on their faces. The thugs on the other hand looked pissed. "We're not villains, asshole," Hans said as he yelled at Izuku. "But that doesn't mean we won't kick your ass unless you back off," Hans threatened as he pulled up his hand as claws grow out in a threatening manner. Nail claw transformation quirk. Make his nails sharp and extend a few inches. Possibly sharp enough to cut through flesh, unknown if sharp enough to cut through metal, sole purpose is for cutting in combat. Large hands could provide above average grip strength. Fighting style most likely consists of swiping and stabbing motions with the hands. Best counter would be lock wrists in place. Izuku thought in a second as Goggles stepped forward towards Izuku. "Yeah, you messed with the wrong guys," Goggles said with a snobby voice as he held his hands down before yellow fluid started to fall from his hands. "My super glue quirk will shut you up," he said in a cocky voice. "An idiot." Izuku rolled his eyes mentally before focusing. Super glue emission quirk. Mostly like he produces a finite amount of yellow glue from his hands, great for taping opponents or slowing them down. Izuku then noticed the glue was not touching the floor but was still attached to Goggles' hands, hanging like a loogie. Most likely the user is unaffected by his own glue until it leaves his hands. Glue also appears to be stuck together and attacked to the user's hand, most likely can throw it a certain distance and still hang onto it like a whip. Mucles grunted as he brought up his bare arm as red rock covered his arms up to the shoulder. Rock fist transformation quirk. Able to cover the user's arms in a rock-like substance up to the shoulders, possibly more. Increases his durability and attack but only in his arms. Counter. Use opponent's own weight against him. Izuku glanced around the ally. It was narrow enough that only two of them could come at Izuku at once. "I can take them all at once, but it would be better to pick them off. All I have is my bow and a few arrows, but since the ally is so small if one of the thugs moves out the way I might hit the siblings." As the archer glanced around, he saw a rusty metal pole leaning against the wall right next to him. Giving a small grin, Izuku grabbed the metal pole, confusing everyone a bit. "What are you doing?" Hands asked while narrowing his eyes. Izuku, but on a serious face as